MEDICI Studio. This is our weekend wisdom. I'm here today with Alex Baker of Relay Ventures. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Aditya.
I've known Alex now for more than 10 years. I just looked in my Gmail and I think our first communication was probably 2009, 10, something like that.
I remember. I was going to ask you if you remembered when it was. We were doing due diligence on Payphone, and Roger Desai said, "Oh, you should talk to Aditya. He's our champion inside of Verizon." And so I was in New York at their office. I want to say it was like, I can't remember. It could have been 7th Ave. Anyhow, I remember coming down because we were going to meet you for a coffee. And coincidentally, when we were meeting you and you were at Verizon, a Verizon truck pulled out front, I guess to do some work.
Yeah.
And I was sort of did a double take thinking you were going to get out of the Verizon truck.
So
and you were,
I have actually, so this is a digression for folks who are joining us here. Thank you for taking time. Also on a Saturday, this is being live cast, or at least we're trying, on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And the folks who are here on Zoom, obviously you have made a commitment to be here, so thank you. But Alex, I must tell you, when the union threatened to walk out during contract negotiations that happen at Verizon every few years, some of us in the management team got trained to climb poles and to fix cables overhead. So if it was one of those years, there was a good chance that I might have walked out of that truck, with my helmet on. Okay.
All right. So it wasn't that far off. We weren't that far off.
Yeah. So I have known you and Relay for a bit, but maybe we just start with you introducing Relay Ventures in your own words and yourself.
Sure. So we're based in Toronto. We've got offices in Menlo Park, an office in San Francisco, an office in Calgary. We have 5 investment partners. We're a firm of about 25, and we focus specifically at seed and Series A, really across 4 verticals. FinTech obviously is one of them. I guess you and I wouldn't be speaking today if that weren't the case. Property tech is another. Sports and entertainment is a third, and of course, mobility and micromobility specifically is the 4th. And so we focus on those 4 key areas. We do, I call it like late seed, early Series A. We try to look for companies that have some commercial momentum or some signals of product market fit when they're not in revenue yet. And we prefer to lead rounds, sit on boards. We're active investors. I like to say we're not activist investors, we're active investors. And we try to stay with companies for the long haul, through to M&A or IPO or however they should end up. And our portfolio has about 50 active companies across 4 funds. Each fund has been $150 million. They're all U.S. currency funds, which for a Canadian fund is a little bit different. We tend to focus on trying to get our ownership early and then sustaining ourselves for as long as we can, and then bringing in our LPs as investors when things get to be later stage and the risk has been reduced somewhat.
So I want to ask you about those 4 segments you talked about. It's a pretty eclectic mix, right? It's not a mix of 4 things that would naturally come to you. How did that come about? I mean, was it something that you decided to kind of do top down, or has that kind of shaped bottom up? How did you choose to have these 4 areas of focus?
So a little bit opportunistic on one hand, and then on the other hand, very thesis driven. So I won't give you, I can't give you a perfect answer, but I can tell you, like for FinTech as an example, I spent 15 years consulting before I got into venture. The first venture job I had was with the Royal Bank of Canada, and so you could see a natural evolution there. I spent, those years that I was consulting with payments companies. I spent a lot of time working in Foster City with Visa. I spent some time working with MasterCard, American Express. I spent some time in Europe with Barclaycard. So I spent merchant acquiring, issuing, basically the entire gamut, and the network, the entire gamut. So that sort of the financial services piece came naturally, and FinTech came naturally, and we were doing it early, earlier than most. If you look at the history of our funds, and in particular our investment in Payphone, right? That was just a natural extension. Then if you look at property tech, a little bit more opportunistic. We have very close relationships with a lot of the developers in Toronto, in Canada, that have international footprints, and they came to us with a proposal about a year and a half ago and said, look, we're seeing all kinds of technology try to take over what's happening inside how we manage buildings, inside how we try to sell, inside how people are shopping, and the services that they require for commercial buildings. What do you guys think about putting some money together in a property tech fund? So we did that with them, hence our focus on prop tech. That kind of led to this focus on mobility, believe it or not, because what we learned from them was they have challenges around how people are going to get around, how food is going to be delivered into buildings and, apartment buildings and condominiums, and how food service is going to exist inside of very, very, very large office towers. They had some understanding of how things were getting disrupted through scooters. And then in the background, how robotics were changing things. So we came up, then we said, well, maybe we should have this thesis on micromobility. We were presented with an opportunity to go and do due diligence on Bird and a couple of the other deals in that space. And we decided to do a deal in Bird, but in parallel with doing that deal with Bird, we were going to launch Bird Canada. And so, we are the exclusive provider of Bird scooters in Canada. So that's how that came about. In sports, we've always been very passionate about sports. We've had a number of investments in the health and wellness space. And we've seen sort of a lot evolve through our investment in the Score, that's a global platform. It focuses on content initially, fully digital platform. They curate and create their own content, and it delivers scores probably faster than any other platform in North America, for sure, across all major sports. And like I said to you before, they have their own content. Well, through that, we discovered, look, there's this huge opportunity in micro betting. There's this huge opportunity in venue experience. There's this huge opportunity with athletic performance. And so that became another sort of foray into it. So, some of it's thesis driven, but I think like all good VCs, we get our next idea from the ideas that we're invested in and the smart people that we surround ourselves with.
So we chose to talk about reassembling today, right? The jigsaw puzzle. And, this is something I received in the mail the other day. A jigsaw puzzle. Thank you for sending
You're
that.
welcome. Yeah.
This is the jigsaw puzzle, which has all the Relay Ventures portfolio companies in it.
Yeah, move it up a bit. You'll see a few fintechs in there. Move it up a bit. So we got you'll see Payphone is in there. You see Rally Road is in there, and of course you see Greenlight that's in there, and there are a few others, but those are some of the prominent fintech deals.
And it also says ages 0 to 100 years. So obviously age no bar. Anybody can enjoy this puzzle. So let's talk about this piecing together of the puzzle. What exactly are we piecing together here, Alex? What are we reassembling?
So, if you look back to like 2011 or 2012, there was this whole push around the unbundling of financial services. And everyone said, you know what, let's separate out. The issue is that if you look at large banks, they bundle their services together. You get charged a bundled fee across all of your products for the most part. And we need to simplify these products because there's just too much going on, and most people don't need the bundle, and they're not using the bundle to take full advantage of the value that they're paying. And so, the unbundling began. It began basically with PayPal being disintermediating a lot of the networks and a lot of the merchant acquirers, and it evolved from there into large banking platforms that were independent. And who was it? Was it Simply? That was the real first unbundled offer that was targeted at a different use segment that then got acquired by BBVA, and that was kind of the beginning of it. And so what happened was these companies went out and they offered simple, let's just call them simple financial services platforms that were very targeted at specific demographics that were underserved. And by the way, if you look back to like 2005 and 6 and 7, and I know because I was involved in a lot of these strategies, the networks were saying, geez, there is a massive opportunity for the unbanked and underserved markets to leverage debit card platform and go to market with an offering. The problem was they couldn't get any of the banks to buy in on that. The banks had their bigger customers. They needed the deposits. They had to have the deposits in order to lend money and make a ton of money through their lending platform. It just didn't, one didn't match the other. Well, then a couple of people that were smart said, well, we'll just do it and we'll go, direct to market. And so that was the unbundling. That's when it started. Okay. And then it started with retail banking. And then, the evolution of this was, well, there needs to be this open API architecture. So banks started to open up their APIs more. And then Plaid came along and people started building individual applications on top of them. We had, before Plaid, you had, wealth management coming out as its own platform. You had Robinhood come as a trading platform. But what did the term platform mean? It didn't really mean anything. Then they started adding services onto it. SoFi, it's a lending platform, right? They went and bought a processor. Well, why did they buy a processor? Well, because it's very clear what they have aspirations to be. They want in on the bank, on the lending side. They want out on the deposit side and the ability to spend. And so they had to decided to buy the processor to do that and supply others. And so this whole rebundling that's happening is that when you look at these very targeted applications that are built today, whether it's wealth management or banking or even payments,
right?
We're rebundling services with payments. I mean, you will be, I think in a year from now, no matter if it's a consumer product you're buying, a digital, wouldn't be digital product, but let's just say a consumer hard good that you're buying, a technology product, you're going to be hard pressed not to find an insurance offering right beside it. You see it today in Amazon, you see it today with Staples, you see it today with every major provider saying, well, if you buy a printer, we're going to sell you a $60 insurance plan, a pair of headphones, we're going to sell you a $15 insurance. Like, it is everywhere. And I think it's everywhere with the major retailers. And I think that's like a rebundling. That's what we're seeing.
And this rebundling, right? This is happening, across, a few different areas, which we were thinking about together only in kind of the mega city group days, right? Insurance, lending, wealth management, payments, all kinds of different financial services under one umbrella. Obviously, today, it is happening with VC-funded tech startups, where the starting points are all different. Somebody might have a starting point of lending, somebody might have starting point of identity, somebody might have starting point of something else. And it is happening as we speak, like you said. But the road obviously is not going to be clear, right? Or do you have a thesis, or do you have kind of a good view of the road ahead, saying this is how this rebundling will end up, and how the equilibrium will manifest itself? Do you have a clear view, or are you kind of taking it as it goes?
It depends on the sector. So you have to sort of take it how it goes. The thesis would be around, do we think that the technology is a great, it will provide enough adoption and enough of a groundswell in order to attract others to want to bolt their services on top of it. Okay, so thesis.
Looks like we have a bit of a connectivity issue here.
This has to be around the tech. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
I'm back. Sorry, I had a technology interruption on my device. So thesis one has to be around the groundswell that you can get, right? Can this be enough of an attraction to get a large enough group of customers so that you can rebundle and it makes sense financially to do it? You're not going to be able, as a startup, you still need to be squarely focused on what you're great at. You need to have a single view product single product, a single view focus of the product that you're building and who you're building it for to get product market fit. And then you can start putting, you can have a vision, but know what you're selling. I'll give you an example of that. So then the second thing is this technology going to be, is a team strong enough to be able to build the hooks to get in? I mean, I've given you a sort of a bit of a view into where the thesis area lies around unbundling, how we see insurance as an example, bundling on top of payments everywhere. But I could give you an example of this whole rebundling, like Touch Bistro, which is top 2 restaurant point of sale companies, I'd say North America or the world. I mean, we've got a global footprint with them. We have offices in the US, in Canada, in the UK, in Mexico. Like, this is real, real company, $160 million raise last year. Real company, right? Started off as a restaurant point of sale service. We were offering integrated payments. We did a deal with Barclays, with JP Morgan Chase. We did a deal with Barclays. I mean, we're basically bundled and tightly integrated payments into that now. So that's bundle number 1. We knew that was going to happen. That was obvious when we did the seed deal. Even though it was 2012, it was coming. But they've built a quote store. Everyone's built a store, right? It started with Apple, then Shopify built a store. These bolt-ons, and sure, well, you can borrow on Touch Bistro, like Square. You can do workforce management on Touch Bistro and integrations into payroll. You could think about the future of payday lending and other services like that. I mean, you could even think of restaurant insurance that sits on top of that. So, my view is, like, do we have a specific thesis that I can articulate around rebundling? A little bit of it is gut feel and saying to yourself, is this the right product to bundle things on top of? And is this the right team? I'll give you another great example, like Greenlight. It's a very, very, very easy. I walked in there 3.5 years ago and I met the founders. They're a mission-driven company. They want to teach financial wellness to youth. And I was like, I have 3 kids of my own, thinking to myself, this is genius. On top of that, they have a platform to be able to do a bunch of other things. So today, you're a debit card that you can restrict where kids spend their money. You can easily transfer money to them. But what did we add? We added a savings account with goals, with the ability to pull money out, to match funds, to give parent-driven interest rates. We've added things that have nothing to do with financial wellness, but have to do with how to be a good kid, chores, allowance, things like that. So there, and by the way, there tons more to come. I'm sure that our audience can visualize where payphone's going, Greenlight's going. Anyhow, the point is that it sort of has to come. It's a bit of a gut feel. And I think, going out and looking for X or Y, it restricts you a little bit. So we are thesis driven, but we're thesis driven around categories and thesis driven around size of market. But really, when you're investing at kind of a seed and late seed, it is 90-10 split. 90% team, 10% product. That product's changing over time. And you hope that the team doesn't. The team just gets better. You have the core and they just build around them.
You mentioned Payphone. Obviously, that's how we met for the first time. And Roger's a great friend. And I have seen Payphone and Roger, the company, evolve over the last 12 years. And I'm sure the same thing happens for any good company, right? Where you have to evolve. I mean, we have evolved as a company. I'm sure you feel the same way about your business as an investor, as a fund, that you evolve, right? So clearly, the evolution and kind of trying to stay ahead of the labels that people try to put on you, right? That is a process for any company or a fund. Is there a favorite, right? You have seen a variety of these attempts at classifying things or themes or theses into, hey, this is a mobile play, this is a platform play, this is a fintech play, this is a data play. Do you have a favorite label?
Absolutely not. The problem we have is that when we look at deals in micromobility, they overlap with real estate. When we look at deals in the real estate tech space, they overlap with payments. When we look at deals in the sports space, they can overlap with payments or real estate. Like we did a deal in the real estate space around parking management. Okay. And what they were trying to do was, or what they are doing, is they're taking underutilized parking spots for events, sporting events. Okay, so there's an overlap right there. And they're pushing them through their mobile phone and having you pay through your mobile phone. So there's a payments piece to this, and there's a mobility piece to it. It really goes across all sectors. So, I mean, the short answer is, and I know a lot of guys, I have a ton of respect for people that say they're FinTech investors. I think there's a crew that I think very highly of, that are through your network as well, and same people that you know and others. And, you know, they all say that they're FinTech investors, and I certainly appreciate that. I feel like, you know, first of all, I don't want to be a generalist investor. I don't think that, so yeah, I will look at other deals. I've done other deals outside of the FinTech space because they've been great founders. And so it's tough to label yourself the FinTech person, because I think you'll always find reasons to go to, you know, to distract yourself.
You know, I don't know if there's any hidden meaning here in this, but there's actually two mobile towers in this picture. Not one, but two. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, call me biased, but I do think that we haven't yet fully leveraged the power of some of the big open platforms out there. You agree? I mean, you know, we still haven't gotten kind of the true potential from mobile platforms, I think.
Okay, well, that's for sure true. Like, we were a mobile fund, by the way, for a long time, and that's when we first met, right? So we were the mobile fund, and in 2008 when we launched, actually, it was easy to be the mobile fund because we were the only mobile fund, and then everyone became a mobile fund, and we said, well, we got to find a way to still do mobility, but then we became the IoT and mobility guys. I think as you look now, like, it's interesting you say that about the platforms. Like, I couldn't agree with you more. We look at, I think 5G is going to just enable a bunch of services we're not even thinking about today. And frankly, in North America, the focus hasn't been, from entrepreneurs, the focus hasn't been on what services can we build on top of the 5G network that makes the world better. It just hasn't been there yet. You know, they haven't dropped. We'll see a lot. I know we'll see a lot on city management. You know, I know we're going to see a lot on travel tools and in the mobility space, and probably in the prop tech space as well. And then, of course, we're going to see a ton on the communication side, a ton. As you peel that back, I would say also, you know, you have to look at things like machine-to-machine payments, which would be that's a beautifully interesting play. We've tried to seed a couple companies in that space, actually, that use this global network of cloud infrastructure versus, you know, using it as distributed architecture for fast payments. Just the market hasn't come yet, right? We haven't come to this. We've all talked about micropayments. We all know they need to exist. They're going to be triggered by machine-to-machine payments, not by, you know, me sending you micro funding. I don't think that that's a broad enough use case. But that 5G, I think, is going to start to enable that. And so you talk about those quote platforms. It's coming. It's coming. And we were early, by the way, on companies that were doing that were exposing APIs in the carrier network so that people could build on top of them. The problem was they were competing for, and you know, early stage engineer focus against Apple and then Google that had the distribution mechanism and had people that were filling their accounts and willing to pay.
And now add to that Tesla.
Yeah, right? No kidding. I mean, yeah.
Talk about micropayments, right? Who's going to control that platform? Is it Tesla? Is it Apple? Is it Verizon?
Yeah, geez, it's going to be, that is going to be, once Tesla's getting there, right? Once they've got, and once they've got that groundswell, which it'll happen. I think I got to think about that a lot. That's a real interesting point. But you're right. Who owns, at the end of the day, who owns the customer and who owns the access to the customer?
I mean, that's an age-old question. I want to start wrapping with one kind of broader crystal ball kind of question here for you, Alex. And you know, you've been a VC now for a while. You weren't always a VC. right? You chose to become one. We are also seeing, a whole crop of friends in the industry who are choosing to become VCs today, right? And this might not be a question that you get asked often, but I want to ask you this. I have been asked the question by people from the industry as they were choosing to become VCs, should I do it? And I said, no, I don't think you should. And that was for this one particular individual. But what would be your advice for people, ex-founders, ex-executives who are looking to become VCs? What would be your advice to them?
Oof. I'd say, you have to have, first of all, you really need to be focused on portfolio theory, because the truth is, and failure hurts, by the way, no matter if it's, for us, 500,000, 250,000, 3 million, it hurts. Failure hurts. So that you need to have that emotional balance between the ones that are really driving you and the ones that are weighing you down. That's from an emotional side. Forget about the financial side. I mean, wouldn't be the law of averages here. It's the law of, the top 2%. And so that's why you need to have portfolio theory. Number of shots on net is probably the most important. That is we all look at things differently, but it's the most important variable that I look at, right? Which is, do we have the right number of shots on net? And do we have the appropriate, what is the balance between our ownership in across the board and those shots on net? And so it's actually very, very, very difficult. This is an extraordinarily difficult business, because it's exceptionally, you're sort of starting from zero. In large businesses, you have a base that you start to work with. You have predictability around revenue. So when you go to take a risk, yeah, it's a risk, but you always can rely back on the stability of the revenue that you had, or you can rely on the risk that somebody else is, picking up some aggressive growth, while you're not. We don't have that luxury here, because each business is individually focused. So I don't know if that answers your question, but geez, portfolio theory is the most important piece. And then the other thing is, this is about picking people. It's not really about picking ideas.
Yeah. And, I think that's something that we are trying to bring out in these conversations, that, there's a certain set of priorities, constraints, challenges on both sides, right? Investors, you have your own equation. The founder, they have their own equation, and the equations have to meld, right? It's not, it's not about just a pitch and getting a yes or a no. It is about equations being solved from both sides. Right?
You have to ask yourself, you have to be able to answer the following question also. What's harder, writing off an investment or writing off an entrepreneur? And by the way, both of them have their tribulations. Very hard.
I'm going to ask you one last question here, specifically because you invest in early stage companies, right? And one of the points of advice we're getting from a lot of people these days is that, hey, this is a great time to think about something new, right? People are forced to reflect on where they've been, where they want to go, starting something new, starting something meaningful, impactful. This is a good time, right? Let's use this crisis to build something new. What's your advice for people who are thinking of starting a new company today? In the sectors you play in the worldview that you have, in the theses that you have, what would be an advice for someone starting something new?
Yeah, well, I think, if you look back 5 years, and the reason I'm looking back 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, is because the advice that a lot of entrepreneurs would receive at that time would be, step one, go secure some money. Step two, come up with an idea, right? Not really, that's being a little bit irrational the way I say it, but I sort of mean it that way, which is like, those things happen kind of in parallel. Well, I kind of have this idea, I kind of have this idea. I've got these great, former Facebook employees or Google employees or Uber employees that are willing to fund me and help me build through it. So I'm going to raise some money along with this kind of idea, and then, you know, we'll hope a little bit, but we'll work really hard at making sure that the idea can be commercialized. But I think today it's different, right? Today is that people are going to expect to be presented with ideas that have some sort of commercial traction. And whether it's product market fit, I like that term. Personally, I like that term a whole lot, which for me is like, what's the adoption and what's the engagement? That's critical and important at the earliest stage. Like market size is sort of like, it's important, but I wouldn't be talking to someone if I didn't believe there was a market there. That's always my theory. So I would say like ideas have to be way more refined than they were 3 or 4 years ago, or even 2 years ago or a year ago. The bulk of money is definitely being pushed into mega rounds. That's last 6 months. If you look at the numbers from the last 6 months, the majority of capital has gone into these rounds that are $100 million plus. And I would also say, and this is a bit of a selfish comment for us and I think all VCs, but I think valuations have come down, and they're coming down particularly at the earlier stages. And so, you know, if before you were an entrepreneur, and rightfully so, I think focusing on dilution is the most important thing you can focus on, because you really want to own as much of this thing as you can. So it's really less about, frankly, it's less about what the valuation is. It's more about what the dilution is. The conversation shouldn't be around, oh, I just did this financing and it was a pre of 50 million bucks. Actually, the conversation should be, I just did this financing and I still own 40% of the company. You know, that's what it should be. It shouldn't be like the marker for a great company isn't necessarily what that valuation is. It's how much does a founder own at the end of this? And are, you know, do they own the requisite amount for the amount of effort that's been put in over 10 or 12 years to build it? So I don't have a direct answer for you, but I do know that like our criteria is changing in terms of how we're looking at deals. Our criteria is changing in terms of how we look at the commercial viability or the commercial success of a product out of the gate. And I suspect that we're not alone, right? I think that as I talk to, you know, my peers, which we do an awful lot of, either at the board or we reach out, like same way as entrepreneurs talk to each other, we talk to each other about what's happening in the market and valuations. Like the earlier stages, they're coming down, and I suspect they're going to be down for a little while. So that, I think that should force the mindset of take your time, figure out what something looks like, figure out what the market is, try to sell a little bit into it, use those tactics, and then go out and raise money. That's just me.
Well, thanks for that, Alex. You know, we have, so you mentioned product market fit. We actually have a weekend wisdom session on product market fit, July 11th. So that's going to be the topic in that interview. We have a focus July 4th on B2B FinTech. And then next weekend, we're going to talk about successful startup boards. So we have a series of conversations already lined up. So go check out the events page on gomedici.com/events. I really enjoyed this conversation, Alex. I think I learned a little bit. I hope our audience finds something to reflect upon and become a little wiser here this weekend. So Alex, thank you.
My pleasure. Atish, it's always nice to chat with you and get an update on how things are going. And, you know, this is like a crazy time. So, you know, me being in my backyard, you being in the MEDICI Studio, this is like, the one thing that's changed is that I think people have become, you know, we have a more intimate view in, I had the very same conversation I had with you, you were sitting in your backyard. So we have a more intimate view of what's going on in people's lives now and in their livelihood and what makes them tick. So, you know, I appreciate you welcoming me into your home last week, and I hope you feel as welcome in mine.
I can smell the flowers in your backyard here. Let's go back to weeding some of those from our gardens now, yeah?
Beautiful, beautiful.
All right, bye now. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.